When it started with me, George, Paul and Ringo, and we said, listen, man, you know, here's another field of professionalism that doesn't need any qualifications except that you've got to get down to it, you know, and want to do it. And you can make it in the terms of the world, the terms of reference they're talking about. You can make it without that pressure of the 11 plus, etc., and GC and all that. And everybody at the same time was finding that out, you know. I mean, I had my guitar, and Mick Jagger had his in London, and Eric Burdon was up in Newcastle, and we were all going through the same changes at once. And we all discovered that the values didn't mean a thing, you know, and you could make it without college and education and all those things, you know. It's nice to be able to read and write, but apart from that, I never learned anything worth a damn, you know.
There's an exam they have in England that they hang over your head. You know, there's a couple of them, but one of them is called 11 plus, and they hang it over you from age 5. You know, if you don't pass the 11 plus, which you take at 11, obviously, then you're finished in life. So that was the only exam that I ever passed because I was terrified. And after that exam's over, the teacher says you can do whatever you want. So I just painted.
Then from there, you start, I don't know, maturing or thinking about the trip. The first effects of the drug wear off, and you start coasting along a bit, and you have time to look at the trees. And that developed into the actual acid scene, the psychedelic bit, you know. And everybody was grooving around with flowers and that. And then, of course, like any drug, it wears off, and you're back to so-called reality. Anybody who's been in the drug scene, it's not something you can go on and on doing, you know. It's like drink or anything. You've got to come to terms with it, you know, like too much food or too much anything. So you've got to get out of it. You're left with yourself all the time, whatever you do, you know, meditation, drugs, anything, you know. But you've got to get down to your own God and your own temple in your head, like Donovan says, etc. And it's all down to yourself, you know.
This is a religious question.
Yeah, what happened to my guitar? That's all I'm worried about.
That fella out there had it with him, and Jim Harris is holding on to it.
Oh, good.
John, when the Beatles were at the height of their popularity, you were quoted as saying something like, now we're more popular than Christ. In view of Christ's recent comeback, do you think that's still true, that rock music has more of an influence on young people than religion?
I still think that's true. I don't know whether religion, because there's many religions, you know, and that point about being bigger than Jesus was the fact that the influence of the Beatles at that time was larger than the Christian religion that we'd been brought in, for sure, anyway. And at the time I was really talking about England, but, you know, after that whole Holocaust, many priests stood up and said, he's right, what are we going to do about it? So, you know, maybe that's what got them excited. But I wouldn't say it's bigger than all the religions, but I think rock music certainly has a vast influence on the world's youth, you know,
John,
as much as religion, I'm sure.
In looking at your past career, especially
I don't think, personally, that the Jesus freaks will be a lasting thing, you know. I think it'll be like the hula hoop.
John?
Okay, no more of those daft questions. I'm sorry, I didn't mean daft. You know, let's keep the show.
Looking at the Beatles, and now you're with Yoko working at art, was it all worth it?
The only thing, my biography now reads, born, lived, and met Yoko. Whatever I went through was worth it to meet Yoko. So if I had to do all the things I did in my life, which is have a troubled childhood, a troubled teenage, and a sort of amazing whirlwind life with the Beatles, and then finally coming to land was meeting Yoko, and so therefore it was worth it.
Do you feel this is the beginning now that you're with Yoko?
Yoko is the beginning of life for me, yeah.
The Yesterday and Today album, I always take the cover and I try and peel back
to look for the dead babies, but yeah.
How did that happen? That album cover that never saw the light of day, or if it did, got pulled off very quickly?
It went out. We took the pictures in London at one of those photo sessions. By then, we were really sort of, you know, beginning to hate it. A photo session was a big ordeal, and, you know, you had to try and look normal, you know, and you didn't feel it. And the photographer was a bit of a surrealist, you know, and he brought along all these babies and pieces of meat and doctor's coats, so we really got into it, and that's how we felt, yeah. So we sort of, I especially, pushed for it to be an album cover, you know, just to break the image, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it got out in America, and they printed, it's about 60,000 got out, and then there was some kind of fuss, as usual, and they were all sent back in or withdrawn, and they stuck that awful-looking picture which you have in front of you of us sitting, looking just as deadbeat, but supposed to be happy-go-lucky foursome.
You look very unhappy.
Yeah, right. So we tried to, you know, do something different.
Album covers were much simpler then, right? Just a cover.
You just walk in, take your photo, and walk out. You know. Especially in America, because we made only, say, 10 albums, actually. In America, there seemed to be 30 of them. And so we would design a cover or have control a bit more of our own covers in England. But America always had more albums, so they always needed another picture, another cover.
We used to be very upset because England would have 14 tracks per album, and then we'd only get 12.
Well, we used to say, why can't we put 14 out in America, you know, and stop them? Because we would sequence the albums, how we thought they should sound, and we'd put a lot of work into the sequencing too. And we almost got to not care what happened in America because it was always different. They wouldn't let us put 14 out. They said there was some rule or something that we... And
Greed, I think.
Well, whatever it was, you know. They just... And so we almost didn't care what happened to the albums in America until we started coming over more and noticing, like on the 8 tracks, they'd have outtakes and mumbling on the beginning, which is interesting now, but it used to drive us crackers because we'd make an album and then they'd keep 2 from every album.
In 1963 and 4 and 5, when the Stones were the group that was coming up hard and strong behind the Beatles, were you all friends?
Yeah, we went to see them at, I believe the place was called Crawdaddy in Richmond. And immediately we started hanging around London. The Stones were just up and coming in the clubs then, and we knew Giorgio through Epstein, and we went down and saw them and became good friends. And the story on I Want to Be Your Man, which we virtually finished off in front of them, because they needed a record. They'd put out Come On by Chuck Berry, and they needed a quick follow-up. And we went down, we met Andrew Oldham, who used to work for us, or used to work for Epstein, and he'd then gone with the Stones and probably got them off Giorgio Gomelski, and he came to us and said, have you got a song for them? We said, sure. You know, and we thought, because we didn't really want it ourselves, which is one way of putting it. We went in, and I remember teaching it to him, you know, and the whole story of it, which helped my memory of it, because it all fades away, is in that book on Mick, which Mick's not keen on. I understand that, but
that's what Tony Scaduto book?
Yeah. But it's all right for people who they're not writing about those books. You know, if it was about me, I wouldn't like it probably either. But I must say, I raced through it for all the juicy bits like everybody else, right? And it's very interesting. I don't think it really harms him. You know, it shows that he knows what he's doing, which is cool. I don't think he did anything to Brian Jones either. We hung around in 2 separate periods. One was when they were initially still playing in the clubs. I remember the first thing one of the members, Brian Jones, came over and said, are you playing a harmonica or a harp on Love Me Do? Because he didn't know how, he knew I got this bottom note, and he suspected I said a harmonica, you know, with a button, which wasn't real funky blues enough, you're supposed, but you couldn't get Hey Baby licks on a blues harp, and we were also doing Hey Baby by Bruce Chanel at that time. And then the later period is when we were both sort of riding high, and there was a discotheque scene in London, and the main club we all went to was the Ad Lib. There was a couple more, but they were never as big, Bag of Nails, but we used to just go in there and dance and talk music and generally get drunk and stoned and high. And one of the records we always played was in the Ad Lib itself, folks, with all of us sitting there listening and dancing, looking super stoned, and the record was called Daddy Rolling Stone by Derek Martin, which The Who later did a sort of version of, like the English usually do of these great records. Not too good, that's including us.
This was an American record?
Oh yeah, another great American record. That's all we ever played, American records. There was no such thing as English records those days. And you know that bit about we changed everybody's hairstyles, but something influenced us, whatever's in the air, to do it, you know? And pinpointing who did what first, you know, doesn't really work. We were part of whatever the 60s was, and we were like the ones that were chosen to represent whatever was going on the street. It was happening itself, you know. It could have been somebody else, but it wasn't. It was us and the Stones and people like that. And here we all are, you know.